Hi, welcome to another edition to Different Stories of Change and Grace. I am Paul and I am your host. Normally I host an interview discussion type recording with somebody about their testimony and share how God has brought them out of darkness and into the light. And this episode is going to be a little bit different. This one is a testimony of my brother Lyle, who has went to be with the Lord. He requested me to share his story to help others not to follow the same path that he did. Although I am speaking, this is through the lens of Jesus in my perspective and relationship with Jesus Christ today. I want to tell you a story of a man who lived a life of pain and an inner battle that stemmed from the worst thing that could ever happen to someone. A story of a man that blamed and ran from God for his pain, just to end up back in front of God in the end. A God that forgave and welcomed him back with open arms. Though we expect most testimonies to people coming to Christ and developing a path and living a long, healthy life to serve our Lord, some people's stories and testimonies just aren't that blissful. My brother's wasn't. As a disclaimer, I'd like to just share with you that I was in foster care, and at my age, I wasn't around to witness a lot of the younger years. So I am going off of just different conversations and messages I've got from siblings to share different aspects of what they remember, and also just through reminiscing conversations that us siblings have had. My brother grew up in the same strict Baptist home that I did, with 9 brothers and sisters. We were taught no drinking, no smoking, no chewing, and don't hang around with those who do. He was really close with my brother Dale, close as twins, as I'm told. They enjoyed going and helping Dad at construction sites and at the shop on Saturdays. In their teens, I was quite young, but in their teens, we moved to Germantown, and my brother Dale and Lyle both got a paper route that they shared. They enjoyed going to youth group and doing things with the church. But in their teenage years, as many do, they started sliding away from the church, started hanging around with them bad kids. Now, a lot of the root cause of my brother Lyle having difficulties in school and getting in trouble with the school and the law in later years was brought out that he had a really hard time with being bullied because of his bright red hair, and he was overweight. It actually got to the point where he got expelled because he punched one kid for bullying him and cut the tail hair, and if you know back in the 80s what that is, he cut the hair off us another kid for bullying him, ultimately getting expelled. After this happened, the slope of sin kept continuing, where drinking and smoking and hanging out with the wrong crowd continued. When the newspaper route money wasn't enough, they would resort to shoplifting and stealing. And my brother just continued to avoid and run from God. As he turned into an adult, he moved down to Texas with a couple of my sisters. I believe it was a couple. It may have just been the one, but I believe both of them lived down there at the time. And when he was there, he got involved with the bad crowd again. But this time it ended up in the use and sales of drugs. I know he had a job down there at a bike shop. My brother loved to work on bikes and get them working when no one else could figure it out. But it was just a path of continuing running from God and running from the truth. Eventually, he moved back to Wisconsin, where he did surrender his life, get saved, and turn his life completely over to God. And it was a true salvation. He would share with everybody he knew about the love of God. I don't remember exactly how long his walk was with God at that time, but eventually he did meet a woman that he fell in love with from another faith and turned his back on the church and got married. Now, just through conversations with my brother throughout his life, he always knew the truth. He always loved God and believed, and he was firm in his salvation, but he was in refusal to walk with the Lord. And that refusal was rooted by what I'm going to talk about next. When he first got married, he had a son. His name was Dustin Dean. And I had the privilege, as I was in foster care at that time, my brother would have me come over to his house on the weekends so I didn't have to go over by my parents. I got to babysit and watch this little man come up through that infant stage. Just a cute little bundle of joy. Just an amazing time that I'll cherish. But at 6 to 8 months, I don't exactly remember when, the Lord took Dustin from us. The Lord took Dustin from my brother. And that put such a void in my brother's soul that I believe he spent the next 30 years trying to fill with everything except for the one thing that could fill that void. He couldn't come to terms. He couldn't understand how God could allow something like this to happen. Dustin was his pride and joy. Every year on Dustin's birthday and his death day, my brother would spiral into a dark hole for weeks. I've watched it single-handedly. He did have 2 more children, both girls, that he loved. He loved very much. But they never were able to satisfy what he was looking, which they never should have been expected to or been able to do. Through working all the time and alcohol, my brother struggled through life. After that first marriage ended, he did have 2 more wives and 1 other serious relationship. And my brother was searching for something to fill that void, I believe. And he was trying to search it through love from women, trying to have that void filled. And when the women couldn't do it, he tried it with the alcohol. His drinking got worse and worse throughout time, and eventually he lost his CDL due to a drunk driving, lost his career. That career that also down the road put him in some physical trouble with his back, because back when he drove, the comfort of a driver was not as important as the freight, and his back was completely wrecked to the point of disability. But now, one of the things that my brother loved to do, he was unable to do anymore. He was a master woodworker. If he would do the trim in your house, it would be flawless. If he did cabinetry for you, it was flawless. I remember my brother Dale telling the story of him helping put the cupboards in his house in Milwaukee, and how for the granite it had to be within a certain level, and my brother would not let it go until it was perfect. He had that ability. He also loved to make birdhouses. He would make birdhouses that resembled your house. I mean, down to the railings on the porch, to the shingles on the roof. His birdhouse would look exactly like a miniature house of yours. But with his declining health in his back, he was slowly and then completely unable to do that one thing that he really loved. So with that, a guy just starts to feel worthless. A guy starts to feel like he's just unable to be the man he was. So now you have someone who has never recovered from the loss of his child, to losses of love numerous times, the alcohol causing relational problems with his children and his one grandchild at the time. In 2015, he moved out of the Milwaukee area up by me to, my company was growing, and I thought it would be a good change for him to come up and help me dispatch. In the beginning, he didn't drink as much up here because he threw all his passion and love into my trucking company. I actually at times got jealous. I could swear that he loved my company more than I did. He had this unbelievable ability to making everybody love him. He had more friends in a month after moving up here than I had living here for 12 years. But he had such a generous heart. Even though he was in pain through whether physically, emotionally, or spiritually, he would give his shirt off the back. If he was able to do it, he would do anything for anyone. Eventually, his disability got him using a walker and a wheelchair, which eliminated him to how much he could work and just opened up the time he had to drink, basically. I guess there's no real good word to say it. Now you have a 51, 52, 53-year-old man that can barely even walk on his own. The feeling of unimportance and that his life was declining just took a toll on him emotionally and physically. He used that alcohol to help with the physical pain, but also to mask the emotional pain that he was feeling. When my wife left and I fell into my hole of drinking, if you watched the previous video, you'd understand, he joined. He was my drinking buddy. He was my best friend. Even though he physically had a hard time doing it, he would come over after work or all day long and just sit with me and comfort me, because I don't know, maybe that helped him forget about the own pain that he had. Throughout this time, my brother Dale would come up, and if you remember, he was very good at the Jesus seeds. He would encourage me and my brother and just drop these little comments of hope and give us inspiration through God's word and different stories. And though those seeds took root in my life, and I surrendered everything to God and received the healing that I did undeservedly, my brother just still couldn't humble himself to the Lord and just surrender and just give it to him. And this last year and a half is what the drinking, now fully disabled and not working, my brother started to drink even more heavy. He was in and out of the hospital. He fell and broke his hip at 52, I believe he was at the time. And because of the amount of drinking and lack of attention for his nutrition, the doctors gave him a 20% chance of surviving a hip surgery because of his malnutrition. But God saw him through that. But he still wouldn't surrender. On numerous occasions, I'd have conversations with my brother, and he was just tired. He was in pain, and he no longer wanted to be on this earth. Numerous times I've heard him say, I just wish God would take me. But see, if God would take him at that time, he'd have a lot to answer for. In 2022, I believe it was beginning of September, end of October or September, I don't have a date down here, we received one more group text message from my brother asking for prayer, begging for prayer. And my daughter, the same daughter that spoke into me for church, went and visited him at the hospital and pretty much told him, hey, every time you have a problem, we've been trying to help you. We've been trying to encourage you to quit drinking and everything else. But all of a sudden you end up back in the hospital and you always want us to pray for you. When are you going to pray for yourself? And conversation I had with my brother afterwards was that's what led him to go to God and finally ask for the forgiveness that he needed to ask 30 some years, and for the strength and the comfort that he needed 30 some years prior. Though my brother finally surrendered that to God, his choices still dictated where his life was going or not going. My brother ended up in a rehab center after his hospitalization, where I had some of these conversations with him and where he requested for me to share his story because he didn't want anyone else to go through that pain and that suffering. He eventually moved down to Jackson, Wisconsin with one of my sisters, where I saw him a couple more times before he went to be with the Lord on October 3rd of that year. You know, we have a God that will wait down until the very end for us. A God that his only desire is for us to spend eternity with him. A God that loves us so much and has so much patience that he'll wait and wait and wait. Hopefully, you're not in that position. Hopefully, you're not still making him wait. See, I know my brother's with the Lord with no more pain, no more suffering, enjoying the presence of God, being able to see his son. But it was a life cut way too short at 54 years old because of the refusal to surrender on time. If my brother could speak today, I think he would encourage the people that when bad things happen, and I'm not just talking about somebody cussing you out or cutting you off in traffic, but when them really bad things like losing a child, losing a spouse, losing a job, having a disability come upon you, that you're never going to find comfort and peace absorbing yourself into work or trying to find happiness through women and that type of lifestyle, or to get the comfort or happiness through substance, drugs, alcohol. None of these things will free you from that pain. It may mask it, but it's not going to free you. The only freedom you can truly find, the only true peace, the only true love that you need to have is through a relationship with Christ. See, God understands the feeling of loss. He had to turn his own back on his son when he took his last breath on the cross for us, because he hung there with all of our sin and all of our burdens that we deserved to die for. And God had to turn his back on his son at that time when Jesus needed him the most. So as for loss, Jesus, God, understands. If you're fighting that battle of hurt and loss, and you feel that you want to blame God, remember the one you're blaming is the one that has the answer. Through free will and sin on earth, sin brought death. Sin brought hurt. Sin brought misery into our lives. And because of free will, God can't stand in the way of us making the choices we do. But when we make that one choice that he's waiting for, that choice to give it all to him, he is more than happy to fill that void, to fill that emptiness you have inside with the true peace, the true love, and true hope. A hope in him and a hope of heaven. Thank you for sharing my brother's story. God bless. I'd like to thank you for joining us for another story on different stories of change and grace. Our prayer is that the stories that we share touch the lives of others and help them see that there is hope through Christ when life seems hopeless. That no matter what darkness we are in, there is light. And that light is through Jesus and is Jesus. Please share this video with anyone you feel that could benefit from this story. If you have a story of your own that you'd like to share, please contact us at differentstory33@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to get you in for a recording soon. If these stories have impacted you, please comment and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe and like Different Stories of Change and Grace, so that these stories can be shared further and farther for the glory of God. I am Paul, and once again, thank you for joining us on Different Stories of Change and Grace.